The Floor Academy podcast is sponsored by Trelama, the trade labor marketplace, where businesses can find skilled trade labor, such as flooring installers, and where flooring installers and other skilled tradespeople can find permanent or project work. You can set up your profile at trelama.com, TRALAMA.com, or download the app from the Apple App Store or Google Play. And remember, Trelama is always free for skilled tradespeople. Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hadeen, owner of Illustrious Hardwoods in Phoenix, Arizona. We are here to talk with flooring professionals from all across the country about the issues that matter to you. This week's guest is Paul Pleshek. Paul owns and operates Floor Claim Solutions in Neenah, Wisconsin. After working in janitorial services and carpet cleaning, he found his way into inspections for carpet. From his certifications from various bodies to be an inspector to his involvement in the industry on committees, Paul has a deep knowledge on flooring. We dive into some standards and why we need to follow them. Paul Pleshek, are you on the line?
I am here.
Awesome. Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. You participate in parts of the industry I have yet to get involved in and have dorked out in ways I can't even comprehend wanting to dork out. So I appreciate you coming on. We are going to talk standards and what all those numbers when you read instructions. Yes, you're supposed to read the instructions, folks. What those numbers in the instructions mean, or at least we're going to start there, and then we'll see where this takes us. So, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know who you are, how you got here, and where you're kind of headed.
Who I are, how I got here. Well, my name is Paul Pleshek. I'm a flooring inspector, and nobody else will listen from here, right?
Oh, nah, they better.
I am a flooring inspector. I came out initially in the industry. This is what everybody loves to hear. All right, and I'll explain my way through it. I came into the industry because I was working at an appliance shop and blew out my shoulder. My dad had a janitorial service, did building services. So while I was rehabbing that, I worked for him, started a carpet cleaning business off the side of that, and got that fairly big, became a master cleaning technician with the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration certification, and moved into carpet inspections. Well, within carpet inspections, I was doing a lot of repair work for manufacturers. So do I have a lot of experience in installation? No, but I've done a lot of repair work. I spent a lot of my time, probably 15 years ago now, restretching carpets, for example, completely uninstalling them, moving them into the corner and stretching them back out. So I've done a lot of that, plank replacements. I've spent a lot of time doing, spot repairs, seam repairs, things that are generally involved in resolving claims through the process. So I started with that, moved into inspections, was certified by the National Wood Floor Association around 2005 for hardwood floor inspections, and turned into a complete and total wood floor geek from there, as far as just the interestings of the anatomy of the tree and the wood and kiln drying and everything that goes along with it. It's incredibly interesting. Sonny Callahan called me up a couple of years ago and said he was looking at starting a National Academy of Floor Covering training. He was taking over the CT, I know, what was it? It was Claudia Lizelle had a school through her own that she worked with the IICRC and did the IICRC certifications for inspection. She started the hard surface inspection side of the IICRC, actually started it before the NWFA started theirs, or right about the same time. And so I started working with the National Academy of Floor Covering Training. I'm now an instructor for inspections for ISCRC approved instructor for subfloor substrates, for resilient floor inspection, wood floor inspection, and carpet inspection. So I'm able to go out and give those courses for ISCRC certification. And that kind of rolled into me being on the board of the ISCRC. My term's up this year, and I will not be going for another term.
Okay, fair enough.
Not a chance that that's happening.
Oh, I'm on my HOA board, and it was for 3 years, and then nobody ran, and so I'm on my HOA board for another 3 years.
Part of our problem with especially in the flooring industry is that we are type A personalities. We go out, we get stuff done. We don't sit here and wait for the wheels of industry to turn before we go do something. We see something, we go get it done. I can't stand the bureaucracy of especially a large organization. So
yeah,
that's on me. It's not, you can't have 65,000 members worldwide and not have bureaucracy. But I just see it as such a hindrance to progress that it just frustrates me to no end.
I won't argue with you on that. All right, so it's the IICRC.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
It's the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration, and it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about today, because they're an ANSI standards body. So they write ANSI, American National Standards Institute, I think, ANSI standards that you see used in, we just are finishing up the S220, which is a resilient inspection standard, working on a substrate standard. We've got a carpet standard for inspections, but they have fire restoration standards. They have carpet cleaning and post-cleaning standards. And you can go on to IICRC and get those standards in a yearly subscription. And I'm not going to be able to tell you what that is off the top of my head. But you can go in and get those standards on a yearly subscription and be able to reference them. So they're not as applicable at this point to installation. With the installation industry, we really rely on mainly installation instructions, and we rely on, industry standards or guidelines, like the National Wood Floor Association has the installation guidelines that they publish and so forth. So there's a lot of areas that we go to for different standards. You've got TCNA, you've got National Wood Floor Association, you've got ANSI, you've got ASTM, you've got Carpet and Rug Institute, all these different bodies that are applicable to their industries.
Okay. So lots of more places to play in the alphabet soup so that you can get all of your information straight.
Yeah, you may not be able to. I can't hardly keep my acronyms straight anymore, and I work with them a lot. So
yeah. So all right. So you said you got certified from NWFA,
yes.
And then you have certification from IICRC as well.
Correct.
Okay. So is there is there anybody else that you?
Yeah, I got certified by Will Stoner. He does it's inspector training services. He's out of Alabama. There's only a couple certifying bodies for inspections that, in my opinion, have enough training to make you a quality inspector to begin with.
Okay.
Right? It's like anything else. Certification is just the very minimum amount of knowledge you're demonstrating to be able to go out and perform a task. So in the long run, the certification may not matter as much as it does early on, especially if that person just is an education junkie and just continues to learn the industry and what it requires. But those are the ones, the ISCRC, the National Wood Floor Association, Inspector Training Services. Those are specifically ones that I think have a education sufficient to become an inspector. And one of the biggest reasons I'll say that is because they specifically train in a specific floor covering. So you're not getting a hard surface certification for inspection. You're getting a resilience certification, or you're getting a hardwood certification, or a tile.
Mm-hmm.
CT, is it CTI? Ceramic tile.
Well, there's CTEF, so Ceramic Tile Education Foundation, which does the CTI.
I think they have an inspector category too, and that one would fall in that category as well. So
okay.
Different organizations. I do prefer also organizations that put together a curriculum or a syllabus as opposed to businesses. So there's other companies out there that certify that are just businesses that certify, and that's just their take. When you have an organization that puts together a syllabus, you've got, a committee of 20 people coming together and trying to think of everything that needs to be done to properly instruct for it. And I think that goes a long way. And it has a lot to do with the fact that the organizations offer product-specific certifications versus companies that offer blanket certifications.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'd rather have something that's specialized and specific than like a generalization. So,
right.
I agree. Okay. So now, do you think you having come from not being an installer gives you an advantage or a disadvantage when you go and you're inspecting floors?
I would say early on it's a disadvantage. I would say early on that knowledge that you take from being an installer and working with it is definitely a background that is conducive to quickly learning inspecting. Now, being an installer can also be a hard hat to change, right? Because you've got to walk in and now you're not wearing your installer hat, you're wearing your inspector hat. So I think there's pluses and minuses from both directions. I think that any installer that can remove that hat and wear the inspector hat is going to have better background initially to be able to diagnose problems. I think that, again, you go back to the initial certification. With time, you learn a lot. And keep in mind that inspectors probably are best compared to referees in football. You can't find me a referee that can outplay someone on the field, but they know what rules are and they know how to identify, and what they're experts at is identifying whether or not the rules of the industry have been followed. So it's an individual thing. Like installing, like anything else, your work ethic, your commitment to your craft is what's going to determine whether you're good at what you do or whether you're not.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Playing by the rules. Boy, isn't that a fun one? So, the big thing now is, I want to say one of the key things that everybody should be doing is moisture testing. Obviously that's going to be listed in every set of instructions for every type of floor you pull out. You're going to have to do some type of moisture testing, and I'll admit that I'm a naughty boy most of the time, and I trust that I'm in Arizona and say it's all good. And if that's not, if I'm feeling funky, I'll go grab my Tramex meter and put that down and see if it pegs out at like 5 or 6 and there's some kind of issue. But I'm not drilling holes and putting in situ probes in, and I'm not doing calcium chloride tests like I should be. And it's definitely something I need to work into my business model, as long as I'm going to sit here and preach that, we need to do certifications and we need to do things right. Like, we all have areas to grow, but I'll admit that I'm not doing everything right all the time. So why does it matter? Like, why do we actually need to go and drill a hole, or, and then we can even get into drilling the hole and putting an in situ probe in versus doing a calcium chloride test?
Well, let's break it. You don't have to. You don't have to do it as long as as long as you're willing to back up and take over the warranty for the flooring,
Mm-hmm.
you can do it any way you want. Just understand that when somebody makes a product, and flooring is the example we understand, they're putting performance standards on it. They're saying that this is a flooring that's acceptable for this environment under these conditions. And one of those conditions is that subfloor isn't going to damage the floor. Now, so I want to be clear. Yeah, follow the directions, do industry standard, protect yourself. The result of not doing that is you carry the warranty. So it's really up to every installer, and you roll the dice, and and we all do it at different times in our lives and in our careers. You know, they've made this easier. This is a 24-hour test now to do an in situ RH test. 24 hours. You go out the day before, drill a hole, you put the probe in, you come back the next day. That's it. So that would be my first. Now I could talk about this. This is obviously about a day's worth of the substrates course, so I could talk about it all day long. But one thing to keep in mind with the meters, the meters are reading what is near the surface of the slab, right?
Yep.
What has that slab, what's the condition of that slab for the last week, let's just say? Has the building been enclosed or not enclosed? Is it the middle of summer? Moisture is driven by vapor pressure. So if you have a room that's high humidity, the building's open, it's the middle of summer, it's in Wisconsin, it's 90% relative humidity, that's going to actually drive moisture down into the slab. Now, you've driven some moisture into the slab hasn't acclimated, you haven't had your furnace or air conditioner running, you come in with your moisture meter and it reads high. Does that mean you've got a moisture problem?
From what you're saying, no. Well, okay, so the meter tells me yes, but what you're saying is no, because it could theoretically balance out. Like, even if you trapped that amount of moisture that's at the surface in it, it could balance out once it's covered and no longer able to escape and still be at a level that's okay. It doesn't mean that you necessarily put it over.
So the meters, while I can understand using them to give you an idea of where to place tests, because if you're going through the building and you've got some higher areas and you've got some lower areas, you can test those in the higher areas and make sure that that's just a localized issue. You want some control areas. But to use a meter like that as a pass-fail, there's so much more that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other side of the coin is that meter's also, again, only testing the surface of the floor. If you're in the middle of winter, building's very dry, you may have very little moisture, but that's what the RH test is drilling in and determining the propensity for vapor to come through the floor. It's trying to determine the amount of moisture that's in that slab that's available to move up in the right conditions. Okay, so, and then you take that and you compare it to the calcium chloride. The calcium chloride is actually measuring the amount of vapor that's moving through the floor right now. There's so many data points that you can collect to come to a reasonable conclusion of whether that slab is ready for flooring or not. But they do take some time. They do take some effort, mm-hmm. and there is a cost associated with it. I often talk to installers and try to encourage that, but what really needs to happen is that needs to become the norm, right? So you go out, you bid a job, you say, well, okay, here's what it costs to install it, plus I have to do moisture testing, so I've got materials and I've got time involved with that, so that's an extra $800.
Yeah.
Right? Well, now are you even in the ballpark? Because the other guy came in and said he's just going to slap the stuff down and move on. It does need to become something that is the norm. It needs to become something that is expected with each quote, not something that a small percentage of installers are offering while the rest of them are not, because it's a competitive bid situation.
Yes and no. I mean, I agree with you, but it's one of those things again where it's, if you're out there doing it and you're going to tell your clients and specifically state, look, I'm going to do this and this is why, it's a marketing point as you're there to separate yourself from the pack. And they can literally go and look at everybody else and say, why aren't you doing this? The other guy's going to do it, and he says it's necessary and that the instructions warrant it. Like, it's all, to me, it's one of those things. It's all in how you sell it, you know? It's so, I don't necessarily think it would deter somebody from going with you, especially, I obviously, yes, it's expensive, but if you guarantee a better install because of it, what's the harm?
You're telling the consumers that are concerned about their warranty that this is required. And really, that would be where an F710 comes in, especially if you're dealing with a resilient floor covering on concrete, because with that, you can just say that this is the required test within virtually every manufacturer warranty for resilient flooring. I don't want to say every single one because I haven't read every single one, but
yeah,
I haven't seen one that doesn't require it.
Mm-hmm.
So carrying around a document like ASTM F710, you're able to refer to it and say, well, that is industry standard. If we don't do that and your floor fails from moisture in the concrete, your warranty is void. We don't have to tell them that they're probably going to go after the installer for doing it that way and you'd lose in court, but
yeah. Well, I mean, look, I turned down an install the other day because they sent me a picture of plank that costs like $1.29 a square foot. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't install that product because the state obligates me to put a 2-year workmanship warranty on everything. And I don't feel you're going to have a product that will last and be a quality product. And at the end of the day, you know, I don't want to see you go through another installation and have to have your house torn back up. But I definitely don't want it to come down on my pocket either, because most likely the manufacturer will somehow say it's my fault. So it's one of those things, you know, like you got to cover your butt. And so, like you said, you know, if we're going to choose to warrant this stuff, then we need to go keep an extra 20, 40, 60, 80K in our bank accounts. But you can add in little things to document and take pictures of and say, look, here, I did it right. Here's the information you're looking for. And now I'm going to present it to you.
I strongly encourage documentation, obviously, especially on the large jobs. Photo documentation. You'll have, there's geo trackers that are on the pictures. There's, you know, that'll tell you where the location was. There's date and time stamps on pictures that'll tell you when you did it. There's things that you can do, and for an inspector, it makes it easier for me, because if I can come in and say, well, here's a report on testing, and here everything is dated, stamped before the flooring went in, and everything passed, it makes it easy for me to say that something changed from the day of installation to the day of fail, right? So you're helping, and I'll tell you, most inspectors really understand that this is an industry that there's a lot of good people working their butts off, and we want to be able to support the statements of the installer. Hearsay, we can't. You know, if did you moisture test it? Yeah. What were the moisture readings? 7 and 8. Okay. Any documentation? Any photos? Anything? No. What kind of meter did you use? I don't know what kind I have. You know, none of that can really even go in the report. We can say you said it, but it can't inform the decision at the end because it's just a statement. It doesn't support the facts for the conclusion.
Yeah.
So by having that material, You hand that over to the inspector and you say, well, here's the results. Even if it's on a form that was dated, it helps. It can be documented at that point. That would be a small step in covering your work as a professional. Document everything document, take pictures of your floor prep. Heck, take your straight edge, take your level, put it out across and show that it's flat when you left. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the house settled, right? The planks are moving, they're gapped, and the installer has documentation of floor prep. Issue didn't show up for 2 years, the house settled. Easy. That all goes, that's just, you're not preparing to fail, you're preparing to succeed at the inspection.
Well, and it just makes sense to document your work as you go anyways. If you're taking pictures of rooms as you move through the home, the client can't come to you and say, hey, there's, a hole in the drywall over here.
Good point.
You're going to have, and maybe your guy did put a hole in the drywall while he was removing the base, just own up and fix it. But that's not the point. Like, you can, if you have the documentation going through to show all this different stuff, you're going to protect yourself. And hard drives are cheap. Like, look, I know from being involved in the flooring industry here for the past 6 years now that a lot of you guys and gals are not necessarily like the most technological savvy people, but man, you can email them to yourself, put them in your phone and set up like a separate Gmail account and just start emailing pictures to it until that email's full. Go to the store, buy a couple $100 hard drive and start backing stuff up to it. Like Paul's saying, as long as you protect yourself and you have the evidence, then you're ahead of the curve and things are going to go better for you. So there's no reason not to take a couple of minutes, especially if how much is a job? The average 1,200 foot job is probably over $5,000 with materials and everything involved. Do you really want that coming out of your pocket, especially if a couple pictures would have saved you?
Yeah, and we live in a litigious society now. People sue over the smallest things sometimes, and you can go in and do an amazing job and have one problem, one small area, and that can cost you the entire job when people become unreasonable. I think that's one thing I get to also with inspections. Inspection type of training for an installer that's a business owner is very valuable, not because that installer necessarily wants to become an inspector, but because you handle claims regularly. And consumers, by and large, are pretty understanding of a problem initially, right? They call you up, they say, listen, I got a squeak over here. All right, fine. You go in, you inject some adhesive, or you relieve the wall somewhere, you leave. They call back 6 weeks later, well, now I got a squeak over here. Well, the second time they're pretty irritated. The third time they're really irritated. And the third or fourth time they want a new floor because it's happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But if you learn how to diagnose what actually happened and figure it out and fix it that first time, suddenly you've got a customer that is going to come back because you not only did a good job the first time, but when they had a concern, you came in and addressed it. Those multiple callbacks on the same jobs are the ones that are killers. Those are the ones that the people get angry about it and think that they got ripped off.
Yeah. No, very fair. Okay. So here's one that drives me nuts, and I'm pretty sure I saw you put a post up about this, so you may be able to help me.
Oh crap!
I know, and I didn't mention this one to you earlier. So if you can't help me, that's fine. Why are the concrete guidelines for what's acceptable in the waviness of a slab not the same as the floor covering guidelines? Why do we got to deal with this nonsense?
Well, it's kind of like the vapor emissions, right? How much concrete gets covered in floor covering? Of all the concrete that's made, how much of it gets covered in floor covering?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I would say a lot. They build a lot of houses.
Numbers that I have heard is around 2%.
Wow.
So 2% of all concrete gets covered in floor covering. Now, keep in mind that's all concrete. So that's roads and that's walls and that's warehouses that never get covered. So so basically, the concrete industry, by and large, says we make concrete. We put the concrete down. If you want to put floor covering on it, then deal with the concrete, right? That's one answer. Another answer is that concrete slabs change, right? They pour the slab, they have it flat, and then it curls and it moves and it can curl up. You fix the curl, and then you cover it with the floor covering, and the curl goes back down, and now you've got a dip in that area. So concrete is, as much as we think of it as a stable, flat, and never moving material, it does change, right? There's always cost involved. If you want a certain level of flatness out of your concrete, they might be able to achieve it, but that's going to cost extra money. The additives they can put in, the mixtures themselves that they can adjust. There's levels of flatness that are required for certain warehousing and manufacturing facilities. That'd be great for floor covering, but they're incredibly expensive to put in.
Okay.
So we have to deal with the slab as it lays. Some of them are bad. We know that. Some of them shouldn't be. Some of them don't qualify for their own standards, let alone floor covering standards. But when we get into putting in the floor, we have to look at it and say, is that material going to bend to the substrate? And how is that bending to the substrate going to affect a locking mechanism, for example? You put it in, it's bridging it, now you walk on it. So you put it in, you got a high spot or you got a low spot where it's bridging the low spot. Now every time you step on it, that flooring is going up and down, right?
Yeah.
That's going to cause the planks to come apart. It's going to cause them to separate and have gaps. You're going to get hollow sounds under the glued down wood flooring because that's not going to conform to the substrate at all. So it's important that subfloor be as flat as possible, but definitely within manufacturers' requirements for flatness, which some of them are pretty dang stringent. No question about it. You think concrete's bad? Up here, almost all the residential stuff is going down on OSB subfloors.
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't flat at all.
Not usually. Those are that's all the upstairs here. So I get a mix of both, but it's mostly, single level concrete is probably a majority of my work.
That's where the subfloor prep talk, like it's, well, are you covering subfloor prep? Are you charging extra for subfloor prep? I don't understand how people don't charge extra for it because it's necessary on every job, and some of it's really extensive. Really extensive.
Yes. No, totally agree. If you're going to get into start having to prime and pour bags of self-level, you can't throw that in. Maybe a bag if you have extra from like another job and you just don't feel like dealing with it, maybe. But if we're getting into pouring a couple 100 square feet, yeah, I don't know how you couldn't charge patching a couple of 100 square feet, even if you're just going to throw down some skim coat something. Why, man? It's still going to take you over an hour probably. Why are you doing it? It's not hard. It's not hard to get a change order. At least I haven't found issues going to people and saying, hey, this is going to cost more money. But it's because I remember to warn 98% of my clients that, hey, I'm not Superman. I can't see the subfloor. It may cost you more money.
Telling them beforehand is an explanation. Telling them after the fact is an excuse. That's how most consumers look at it. If you explain it to them beforehand and it happens, well, it's been explained. But if they get all these charges after the fact, they think you're just making excuses with them or you're trying to upcharge them on something and pull a fast one.
Exactly.
So it's definitely preparing people for the possibilities. That's a huge part of sales in the flooring industry.
Yeah. And just a fair warning, you know, I always tell them, hey, look, I'm not Superman. I don't have X-ray vision, so as soon as we get everything up and I can see what's going on, I can make a better determination of what's going to happen. But I also know that probably 80% of my projects don't need anything done. They're usually pretty good. Like, I can do it with minimal effort. You know, maybe the grinder, as I'm doing something, I have to get a seam, you know, leveled out a little bit. But for the like, it's not, I'm not doing anything extensive to where I have to feel like I have to go and charge them a abundance of money to fix an issue.
Well, it's what's arguable is how much is just a normal part of the job and how much is some sort of an extensive subfloor repair. Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be the challenge, you know, time wise. If you spend an hour doing extra subfloor prep, is that the end of the world? Probably not. But, you know, hopefully you're charging enough that you built in a couple extra hours.
Correct. There's the key, is you gotta know where you as the owner have to know where the line is. You know, if your guy's on the floor spending 5 hours trying to fix something, you probably need to charge for it. But, you know, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, you're probably okay. So, what about, so we can kind of stay with concrete here. The way I read the rules and the instructions, I guess I should say instructions, although they are rules, like on a adhesive bucket of glue, it'll say that I can test it by throwing some water on it. If it pools up, it's got a sealer on it, and I need to get rid of that because the water needs to be able to absorb into the concrete so I can get proper, like, adhesion and everything's going to bond properly. I haven't found a slab that I've dealt with inside a home that doesn't have that on it. Am I mistaken in that they put some kind of additive into these slabs that has like a sealer in it? Do you know if that's the case or not?
Well, there could be some sort of a curing compound on the surface. That's really a lot of what you're looking for when you're looking for the porosity of the surface of the concrete. There is an ASTM standard for that now, and as soon as you started talking about it, I am blanked on what that standard is. But there is actually an ASTM standard for porosity testing of concrete, and it revolves around putting a drop of water on it and leaving it sit, and how long it sits, what the concrete looks like afterwards. Does it soak in? Does it not? So, you know, you are looking for bond breakers, right? Because with any adhesive application, the bond is only as strong as its weakest link. So if you've got a curing compound, or if you've got even sweeping compounds on the surface of the concrete, or if they've come in and done a asbestos with the citrus remediation in there, all of these things that are in the surface of the concrete are going to affect the flooring. So if you try to bond to a curing compound, that bond, you're going to stick to the curing compound just fine. But the curing compound isn't stuck to the concrete, which means you now have a bond breaker between your adhesive and the subfloor. Mm-hmm. So that's probably one of the biggest things. But then you've got hard trowel, you've got these carbonation layers on the surface that are just so dense that it's kind of comparable to gluing a carpet versus gluing a piece of, you know, vinyl down. One's very porous. One can you get a mechanical bond in, and the adhesive will kind of wrap within the material that you're sticking it to, and the other one just relies on the strength of that tackiness of the adhesive to remain adhered to a flat, smooth substrate. So you have to know what you're dealing with in order to know what type of adhesives are going to work properly, or if you need to upgrade adhesives to get that material to stick.
Okay. And I'm assuming, I mean, that's probably something you run into. Have you seen a floor fail because the, like, concrete wasn't ground beforehand and it just, the bond gave up, or silly issues like that?
You want to know the most common bond breaker, the bond failure that I run into is paint along the walls. That's the most common bond breaker I run into.
God,
You
yes.
put the adhesive right down on top of the paint. Well, how well is that paint stuck to the concrete?
Mm-hmm.
Not very. But all you've glued to is paint. So
Yeah.
you pull up the carpet where it's bubbled up, and you've got nice smooth paint stuck to the back of the adhesive and a clean release from the subfloor. So that's really the most common one. When I see bond failures, I normally see too long of open time, where it's not really a bond failure. It's more the never was adhered properly. I see too much open time and too worn of trowels pretty frequently. So, you've got a trowel and you measure the ridges, and they're way further apart and narrower than they're supposed to be. You know that trowel was just shot by the time that they got done with the job, or maybe when they started it, depending on the installer. So that's pretty common. As far as bond failures to the floor, usually that's commercial work. It's usually localized. You'll see some of it on some of these really hard troweled slabs that are just so dense, but usually those are getting something like a pressure sensitive adhesive that's more successful in that application anyway.
Okay. I know there's no official standards. You got a recommendation on how long like a trowel should be used on concrete, roughly? Couple thousand square feet. I'm so anal about it now after reading a report in one of the hardwood magazines where the guy was literally going through 2 buckets of glue, and the first bucket was cool and the second bucket was failing. So,
well, what's your trowel?
Let's go with like standard. Like if I want the moisture barrier with glue for an engineered, they're going to tell you a 1/4 by 1/4 V-notch.
But let's just say more broadly than that. Your trowel is a metering device.
Yes.
It's metering the proper amount of adhesive onto the subfloor to get adhesion for the material. So you have to be conscious of it. To give a time frame on when the trowel's worn out, it depends on how much pressure you apply to the trowel. It depends on the roughness of the concrete, the quality of the trowel. So it's hard to really say it should last X long, but if you ever notice that your adhesive is lasting longer than it should, you're not putting down enough. It's
Yeah.
going to be, if it says 800 square feet on the bucket and you get 1,200 square feet out of it, you didn't put enough adhesive down on the floor. So that's the biggest thing. If it seems like your adhesive if you usually spread some, you put down the adhesive, you spread it out, and you see you're getting a lot further than you usually do with that much.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to change the trowel.
No,
But
that makes sense.
it's a metering device. That's the thing to keep in mind. The minute you put it on the floor and start dragging it around, it's starting to put down less adhesive. But it's not always that, right? You hold the trowel too flat, and now you're not putting down enough adhesive either, because it changes the angle on the ridges.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that goes into properly metering your adhesive down onto the substrate, and a lot of things that you have to be conscious of in the process of doing it.
Agreed. You read all the time. Read the instructions. It'll tell you what to do. And then it's easy. And they won't tell you how often to switch out your trowel, but I guess, Paul's got a good point. And if you're only supposed to get 120 square feet of coverage and you're getting 200, you probably have an issue. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm anal. I'll put down 2 buckets, which is like 240 square feet-ish, roughly, depending on the size of the bucket, maybe 300 if it's a 5-gallon bucket, and I'll toss the bad boy. It's $10. I don't care. Like, between selling 2 buckets of glue, I've got $10 in profit to buy a new trowel. So,
you're not saving any money compared to what you're losing if that job fails.
That's exactly the way I look at it. Especially on a really good wood job. Oof, there's some money behind that one. So,
but you go do the same thing on a wood substrate. You're gluing down on a wood substrate. That trowel might last a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on what you're putting it onto.
Makes sense. Any concerns with like, do they add, are there like weird chemicals and sealers on like OSB subfloors or like the panels that we need to be worried about? Do those need to be cleaned up and whatnot before we're gluing to them or anything?
I have not seen that. Again, paint overspray for gluing to it. It can be an issue, but I've never run into, because you've got the resins within it. If you've got a problem with that, you probably have some flaking of the OSB, and we don't run into plywood subfloors much anymore unless it's a rehab. So the OSB subfloors are going to be pretty obvious if they're water damaged. The edges are going to be swollen up. The actual chips are going to be starting to flake up and peel up. I've never seen one that was excessively dense or unable to adhere to it, but I suppose nothing's impossible. I'm giving up on thinking that anything's impossible at this point. I've been doing it too long to I've walked into too many jobs and said, how the hell did that happen?
So is that the fun part of the job then? Like solving the mystery? Do you feel like you're Sherlock out there and like trying to work backwards through what happened? Is it fairly easy to take those steps to get there? Or are some of them just like bafflers and you don't really know until you get it completely ripped up and you're like, oh man, okay.
I would say one of the hardest things as an inspector is to look at something and say, any degree, I don't know. You're supposed to be the expert. You're supposed to be the guy that goes out and figures it out. And it's tough to go out and look at something and have the self-control or the humility to look at it and say, I don't know. And what I don't know usually means is, hey, we got to do more testing. So those are interesting. Over time, what I've really grown to enjoy is litigation and expert witness work, especially if I feel like I'm really on the right side of the argument. I had a job not that long ago that I was expert witness on that was a sheet rubber floor installed in a hospital, and they had all sorts of problems, but the problem was a flooring problem. They sent their own experts in and basically then tried to blame the retailer and installer for it. And I enjoyed feeling like I was fighting for the right side, but I enjoy the argument with these attorneys. That was a 10-hour deposition I did. 10 hours, 3 different attorneys plus the one that hired me.
Oh man.
And sitting in there and just getting these questions from them. They asked me at one point, they said, our warranty says you got to be certified by us to install this floor. Does that change your opinion at all? And I said, well, does it say that in the installation instructions? No. Did you go out and meet those installers on site and tell them how to do your repair? At any point then, did you stop and say they can't do that repair because they're not certified? Well, no. Okay, then it doesn't change my opinion. So, you can see some of the, it's kind of like going back to standards. Okay. There's some inherent unfairness in the industry, not because anyone's evil, just because, hey, I make this product. I want it put in this way. If you don't want to put it in this way, I'll find someone that will. That's the manufacturer's point of view. Mm-hmm. But when you go to standards, if you serve on an ANSI committee or an ASTM committee, those are supposed to have everybody that's involved. It's a consensus document. It's supposed to have everybody that's involved in that industry involved in that standard. So there should be installers on there. There should be manufacturers on there. There should be people that make adhesives and all of these different retailers, and everybody that's involved in that chain comes to a consensus on how that material is supposed to be installed. So one of the best things you can do is get involved in those standards. Go in there and debate the ideas that you think are unfair to your segment of the industry. Doesn't mean you're going to win, But if you represent those ideas in those bodies, those standards apply across the industry. And we talked a little bit before we got started. A lot of this isn't as expensive as it may sound. If you join ASTM, it costs $75 to join ASTM. You get a complete category of standards. So if you pay $75 to ASTM, you sign in, you go to the FO6 committee, which is the resilient flooring installation, for example. You get on the FO6 committee, and you get like 200 or 300 standards. Now, they don't all apply to the industry. Not every one of the standards within the FO6 is for flooring, right? There's some different detergent things, and some of it has to do with polishes and, applications to the surface of it. But it's a resilient standard that covers F710, which is the preparation of the concrete slab for resilient floor covering. There's terminology. There's all sorts of standards within that category, but you get all of those for $75. It's not that big of an investment, and really all you have to do is if they send ballots your way, if you understand the ballot, you vote for it or against it. And if it's a category that you really don't deal with, you just abstain from the vote. But it's important if you do join to get on those and either abstain or vote to approve or vote to deny. Mm-hmm. So that's the place where installers can have an impact on the fairness of the industry or the perceived fairness of the industry. Get involved. Get on these committees. If you know what you're talking about, if you are an installer that has educated themselves in this industry, get on those standards. Let your voice be heard. Have the debate. You might be right, you might be wrong, but at least debate it for your industry.
Well, you did something. Yeah. No, well, and that's the biggest thing, right? How many guys want to stand out at the workroom and complain about how their wages suck? What are you going to do about it? Bitching about your wages doesn't fix your low wages.
No.
Go out and find a way to improve your wages. Go educate yourself on the standards, get involved with the standards if you don't like them. I think you bring up a really good point. The more involved installers get, the more pull they're going to have. Everyone, we all want to think that the manufacturers have all the control or the dealers have all the control. Go get involved.
It doesn't cost anything to get onto ANSI standards, right? You may or may not get chosen to be on the standard based on your experience and, where you fall, right? So if they go through and they've got 100 manufacturers signed up for a standard and 100 retailers and 500 installers, well, they're going to have to pick 5 from each of those categories. So it doesn't automatically mean you get right onto an ANSI standard, but you want to have the best people in your industry fighting for your part of the industry. And that's when you go, if you go to court. So when you go and you call an inspector out, manufacturer's installation instructions are top dog, right? That supersedes everything. However, if anything goes to court, those ASTM standards become a lot more important, because then you compare, does that ASTM standard, ANSI standard, is that higher than what your installation standards were? Or do your installation standards call for something excessive compared to industry standard of care, things like that? So, there's a lot of always follow the manufacturer's instructions. But if you get caught on a technicality because it conflicts with ASTM or ANSI or, NWFA guidelines or any of that stuff, you've still got a point of argument there. So getting to know those, but you were saying before, if someone wants to complain about their wages, I was just going to say that they could just go start their own business and find out what it's like to be paid next to nothing.
So. Well, I mean, you got that going for you too. So we're obviously this podcast exists so that we can better the industry. That's the goal, whether it's through wages, education, how to run your business, all of it. It all plays a factor. Correct. If myself as a guy that goes and finds all of his own jobs, do I think that I make next to nothing? I mean, there was like a month and a half ago where I was making next to nothing and I was pulling out of a savings account, but it wasn't. I get to control my wages, So.
Employees tend to look at it as you make a lot of money on a job, but they don't necessarily see how much comes out of that money, and they don't necessarily understand what you have to pay in taxes, what you had to pay in supplies for the job.
Correct.
You don't understand that you've had to make your truck payment even when you've gone a month and a half of slow period or shutdown or something like that. So, there's jobs you can make a ton of money on, and hopefully you put some of that away, because there's going to be jobs that you don't get a dime for if you got employees. You might just be paying them to do the dang job.
That's it. I'm still, I feel for the guys that have crews out doing everything. It's not that they can't be profitable, but it's definitely as the company grows, it gets more expensive to run, because you're paying commissions to salespeople. You have the overhead of the store. You have maybe you're paying someone to do scheduling and estimates, and then you have to you have all the guys out there that are installing, and you have to have the workman's comp on them, and you're matching their taxes, and you have to pay payroll processing fees and bookkeeping, like all these. It just keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. I'm still on the floor doing some of the labor, whether I have an apprentice with me or not. That cuts into the amount of money I make, some, but not all. But if I was to completely replace myself, I could tell you I could no longer live the lifestyle that I can afford my family right now. If I was to go pay 2 guys to do all my installs, I feel I would need 3 or 4 crews doing that in order to live the lifestyle.
My theory on business is that you pay people to do what you're not good at. You're good at installing the flooring. You're better off paying people to do everything else, so that you can keep your quality level high, so that you can, keep your productivity level high. Mm-hmm. You can interact with the customers. Business being in the office, right? Until your body gives out, even if you can afford to have extra helpers there, if you're just supervising and taking phone calls, you're still on the job. You're still pushing productivity. You're still pushing quality. A business is always better off when the owner does what they do well and pays people to do the things that they can't do or would take away from time they can make money. You, as a business owner, you should be making money, generating income as often as possible, and paying other people to do the things that take away from your time that you can generate income.
I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm trying to build a business where people do everything for me, because I'm not great at anything. You want to know what I'm great at? I'm great at finding a way to come up with money to pay people to do things they're great at.
I don't disagree. I am not an entrepreneur businessman. Even with the school and that Sonny handles all that, forget it. Let me go do what I do.
So I say it all the time. I'm not God's gift to flooring, man. I can get it down, but I'm nothing special. There are guys doing way more amazing things than me. So,
the artists that are out there, man, there are some people out there that are just, and coming from an inspector standpoint, from an inspector that didn't grow up on the floor and things. When I walk in, I've talked to inspectors that have come from the installation industry, and those inspectors are way harder on installers than people like me are, because I come in and I look at it and I'm like, I can tell they took the time that the job needed, right? It means something to me when I go in and the floor looks like it was well installed, so the details are there, right? The trim looks good around the doors, it looks good around the stairs,
mm-hmm.
all the areas where the details, they put the trim work up, it looks nice, right? That makes me as an inspector question, okay, it's failing over there. They obviously knew what they were doing. They had a level of craftsmanship here. What went wrong over there? Whereas if you walk in on the floor and you look at it, and it just looks like they just hacked it up and just tried to put it in as quick as possible and get out the door. suddenly you're just thinking, okay, this has to be related to the installation, or this installer did such a bad job they couldn't have known what they were doing. There's a level of appreciation, I think, there for a craftsman, a person who does their job well, coming from my point of view, that maybe isn't as natural for somebody that takes it for granted a bit because they did it for a long time and they were good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, I am very appreciative of the artists and the craftsmen and the work they do. I don't take that for granted at all. I think it's amazing what installers are able to accomplish and how they can take a room from looking like a rundown dump and almost exclusively with flooring make it look like it's a highly designed piece of artwork. It's incredible.
Definitely. All right, quick question, last one.
I got all day.
Well, I know, but we can only bore the listeners for so long, you know. There's some guys doing some. So my buddy Bellavora Carpet. Why can't I think of his name? Oh, I'm such a jerk. I feel horrible. He's essentially like taking vinyl planks and building treads out of them. Like he's warping I don't even know what he's doing. He's essentially like warping the product around treads and installing them as full planks. So how would something like that apply for like an inspection? Because you're not taking the product apart. Like it's still together. It's still the product. But it's not you're like done to the, the instructions don't say that you can't turn it into a tread.
Yeah, but you're altering the material. So I would say that by altering the material like that, you're avoiding the warranty on that plank,
mm-hmm.
not the entire installation. But if you've got a problem with that plank, let's say you heat it up and it affects the wear layer, right? The coatings that prevent scratches and things. Is that possible? I guess I'd have to know what he's doing with it. I would think if you're heating it up enough to bend it, you're changing the material. For example, when they make the material, they anneal it. So you take a plank, you heat it up, you fuse it together, you run it through water. That anneals, that brings that normal temperature to whatever that water temperature is. Kind of like when you do it with steel, you quench it, right? So to some extent, by doing that, you're changing the internal structure of the plank. So you could be changing the wear layers. You can be causing some damage internally. So I would say that there's not going to be a warranty on that plank.
Okay.
But, it's a stair. What would it take for him to go in and do it different? And I don't see how I think it's worth knowing that if you're doing it that way, it's not likely to be warranted. But, what warranties do they have on stairs? What are you really affecting, I guess, would be the question. Most floors don't have any sort of a scratch warranty at all, so does that really apply?
Mm-hmm.
Not so much. So
I mean, you're not going to fail a floor over a stair failing because there was a custom design on the stair, is what I'm getting. That sounds like you're saying that, you would would fail that tread. You wouldn't fail the floor.
Right. Well, no inspector should. At no point should an inspector be hunting for problems, right? You should never. You go out to do a claim. There's basically two things that I look at. I make sure I look at whatever's on the request sheet if it came from a manufacturer, and then I do look at what the homeowner points out. So if the end user is pointing out different areas, then I'm still going to look at those areas. Some manufacturers like that, some don't. But how many want to send me out for a second and third trip because I didn't look at,
mm-hmm.
what the complaint was, right?
Yeah.
So I will generally look at that, but I will never, ever add something into a inspection. I'll give you a quick story. I was very early on in inspecting, and it was a carpet inspection. I went out, and I don't know exactly what it was for, but let's just say it was a wear complaint. Well, manufacturers will often send out forms, and they say, make sure you look at this. Well, one of the things they had on there was seam sealer. Being an inspector early on, I'm here for a wear complaint, but they want me to look at the seam sealer. I go look at the seam sealer. There is none. Surprise, surprise. The installer runs into me, and he's ticked off. And he's like, well, why'd you check the seam sealer? I said, well, it was on the form. He said, well, they denied the claim because of that. I never checked it again. And that's just kind of part of the learning process with how some people work. But an inspector should only be looking at the things related to the claim. So if I go in and I look at a floor and they've got, let's say there's no issues, the consumer's just too picky. And out of the corner of my eye, I see the stairs and they've formed the tread to the step. I'm not going to bring that up. I'm not even going to mention that it's that way. I might take a look at it when they're not looking just because I thought it was cool. But it has nothing to do it has nothing to do with what I'm there to inspect.
Okay.
And that should be every inspector that goes out. You don't go out to jobs. I had a lady call me about a shower, which I don't really do much with ceramic. So this was easy, but she said, oh, I think they did this. I think they did that. I want you to come take a look at it. I get there and she's like, well, there's the shower. I said, well, where are the areas you're concerned about? She said, well, I would just want you to look at it and tell me if they did it right. I said, I am not doing that. I actually walked out on the job. She was mad at me. So I'm not going to come in and nitpick somebody's work. If you've got a problem, tell me what it is, and I'll tell you if they did it right. But, so we run into interesting things.
Oh, we all do. So his name's Scott Zito. Scott, I'm sorry I forgot your name, buddy. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus for doing the really creative work you do either. It was something that I thought of, and it's a interesting way to look at what can happen when we bend the rules on things. So.
Yeah, and I'm not criticizing or anything.
No,
it sounds very cool, but if you alter the product, then you do void the warranty on that material.
Mm-hmm.
No, if you had to replace that and they didn't make it anymore, if you had to replace a step because you did something and they didn't make it anymore, could that affect the whole job? It could.
Yeah,
it could. But that's
should have sold them
part
more
of
attic stock.
You can do anything you want if you don't mind owning the warranty. That's where we started, right?
Yep, I know, and I like it's true. Like you're taking on, if you're gonna go do a $20,000 job, you should probably have $20,000 sitting in a bank account somewhere. So,
yep, and hope you never need it. But
that's it. Let it accumulate interest over there. But look, I ain't gonna lie, you're running a high risk business. You're dealing with big money, so you should probably have the money to back it up.
We've had an industry that installers don't necessarily think the warranties are all that valuable anyway, so that's part of it too, right?
Yeah, correct. Well, I mean, that was in our conversation before we started too, is that I tell all my clients, they ask about it, what's the warranty on that? Well, it's lifetime, but do you really believe that? I mean, because I straight up ask them, I'm like, if you went and bought a new, stove and it tells you it has a 5-year warranty, do you trust that 5-year warranty that something's not going to happen to that stove in 5 years? And they're like, no. I'm like, cool. This is lab tested and says you get a lifetime residential warranty for wear layer. What does that mean? These products haven't even been around that long.
Well, and what do the manufacturers know, right? That goes to the original purchaser of the flooring. What's the average time that people are in homes? It's about 6 years is the average, 6 or 8 years at the average that people stay in a single home.
Exactly.
So give a lifetime warranty. How many are you going to have to actually honor because they moved out? It's just like banks. You pay a huge percentage of your interest in the first 6 years. Banks are more than happy to sell you your next house or to refinance it at the same rate or whatever, because almost all that money goes to them for the first 6 or 7 years.
Yep. No, I get it. It's just getting that information out there. Because one of my things is like, okay, so what if I go buy a rental property and I sell the flooring to my son and I put the house in his name? What's lifetime warranty on that?
It's a rental house.
It's still a residence. Where in the warranty does it say it can't be a rental?
Some warranties say that this only applies to. Some warranties say owner-occupied residence.
Well, and probably it's because they've dealt with that claim. But you know what I'm saying? Like even if it is the owner-occupied residence, okay, who's to say I don't sell the flooring to my son who's going to outlive me? It's where's the but that's my point is like where's the line? Do you really trust that this warranty is going to hold up and get you what you want? Probably not. Well,
performance warranties are a lot tougher because we talked a little before we started about weasel words. Well, you know, it's a wear warranty. Well, a wear warranty on carpet, for example. You buy a wear warranty on carpet. A wear warranty is determined by physical loss of face yarn. A wear warranty on carpet is comparable to a wear warranty on your tire. If you run your tire to a bald spot, your tire's worn. If you walk a bald spot in your carpet's worn. So the terminology that's used sometimes, well, look at it, it's all crushed down and it's flat and it's matted together. That's not wear. That's texture retention.
Oh, jeez.
So, you know, so sometimes it's the definitions that get us. Words have meanings.
Yeah. No. Correct, but it's vague. It's always vague. All right, Paul, anything you want to plug? Any way you want to put out there that people can reach you if they have questions? Does NAFCT have anything coming up that I know that everything's kind of been shut down and things have been canceled and moved, but I don't know what you guys are working on in the background there. So anything you want to plug?
Well, we're hopeful that once the government gets up and running, we can get this installation program up and running. It's something that we plan on working with different organizations with. It's going to be involving getting new people into the industry and having a path forward with certification and training for newly interested people working with the Job Corps. That's with the National Academy of Floor Covering Training. Of course, if you got a floor failure, I do inspections nationally, although mostly in Wisconsin. You can reach me at paul@floorclaimsolutions.com, paul@nafct.com. Of course, you can hear us when we do a podcast. I appreciate you having us on because we do a podcast, the Floored-U podcast. Kyle and I talked about that before we started, and you know, it's not competitive. It's a matter of getting knowledge out there, and if we do one podcast a week, that's 2 hours a week of education. Nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
So appreciate you having me on. We don't have anything scheduled right now, but we'll let you know when we do.
Sounds good. Contact Sonny or Paul probably and they got a form you can fill out to say that you are willing to hire a apprentice that goes through their training program at NAFCT, and they need lots of stuff for the third guy involved to go give to the government as he lobbies to get money and get people willing to, like, you know, get floor guys trained.
And to be clear, this isn't competitive to a CFI and to a NWFA. This is something that we're going to get guys through programs, and we're going to branch them out to those organizations for further training. You know, this is a program that's to get new people involved and engaged with the industry. And so we're looking forward to working with all of these organizations that already exist. You know, certified flooring installers, we've already worked with them before, and we look forward to any chance we get to work with them. And I've been on committees with National Wood Floor Association. Absolutely looking forward to working with them on this World Floor Covering everywhere. So
once again, it's not a competition thing, like you said. It's
no.
Let's build the industry.
Exactly.
And one last key point to that is if you get that form, there is talk that I have heard, and tell me if I'm wrong, but potentially you could get an apprentice and you guys are going to pay him and I don't have to.
Well, we're all going to pay them because it's a government program. So if you get an apprentice through the program, it's going to be, last I heard, and it's not all finalized yet, but last I heard, up to the first 6 months of payroll will be covered through the program.
Man, look at that.
So,
who doesn't want a free worker for 6 months? Come on.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, maybe you got to pay workman's comp, but hey, I'll pay workman's comp on somebody making like lower wages. That's cool with me.
And you don't have to pay them until you know whether or not they're worth keeping on. Right? You don't. At 6 months, you're going to know whether or not they're worth their wages or not.
Correct. So no, I think what you guys got going on is great. I'm excited to see. I know there's a couple people working on training programs. As an installer, I think it's our problem first and foremost that there aren't more kids wanting to get involved. We dropped the ball, and it needs to be fixed. It's not on the manufacturers or the flooring dealers to fix this issue. It's a flooring installer problem to fix. But anyone that wants to get involved with it, it needs to happen.
It's an industry issue. I think that manufacturers want readily available labor, so they need to get involved. But that's an additional show completely.
Yeah, no, totally. So no, thank you. I just wanted to throw that out there. I know you need signatures, and I think that's an awesome program that's getting set up. So I turned mine in. I will definitely send me somebody. I'll gladly take anybody for free. Why not? But no, thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time. We will have to get something else scheduled and do something. Maybe I'll have your counterpart Sonny on and we can dork out about glue, because I bet you that guy knows way more about glue than I ever wanted to know.
Not a problem. I think we'll trade it out, because we'd like to have you on the Floored-U podcast as well.
Yeah, anytime. Awesome. Talk to you later, Paul. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's all the time we have for this week. To keep the conversation going, head on over to the Floor Academy Facebook group. Be sure to subscribe so you can hear each and every episode. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and most major podcast directories. Don't forget to leave a review and let us know what you think about the show. If you would like to be a guest, have questions or feedback, you can email us at flooracademypodcast@gmail.com. You can help support the show by becoming a patron over at www.patreon.com/flooracademy. Remember to learn well you earn.